Decades of painstaking negotiations could have been all for nothing. Nearly 20 years ago, Turkey officially became a candidate for full membership to the European Union. Officials in Ankara entered into countless talks to meet the bloc's criteria on governance and reform. But those hopes were recently upended after the European Parliament voted to suspend Turkey's EU accession process. Back in December of 1999, Turkey signed an agreement in Helsinki that would set off the country's aspirations to join the bloc. Official negotiations towards full EU membership began in 2005, but what followed was years of slow progress and tactics by the EU that many in Turkey called moving the goalposts. EU officials countered that Turkey had moved further away from the European Union when it came to governance and the judiciary. Those differences culminated in the European Parliament's vote to formally suspend Turkey's accession bid. Although not legally binding, it has sent a powerful message to Ankara and the Turkish people. Over the past few years, each side has seen regional and global issues complicate their delicate relationship, and although small steps were made to forge goodwill, in the end, it wasn't enough to prevent the March 13th vote. And to discuss the future of Turkey's EU accession process and relations overall, I'm joined by Ambassador Christian Berger, who's the head of the EU delegation to Turkey. Mr. Ambassador, welcome to Straight Talk.
Thank you very much.
I wanted to start off by asking your opinion. The European Parliament has called on the European Union to halt Turkey's accession talks. What's your position on this?
I think the European Commission, the reason why we have this resolution is because the European Parliament has to give its views and comments on a report that the European Commission writes every year. It's the so-called annual report, the country report.
Katipiri report.
No, that's the outcome. But the Commission itself writes a report about the state of affairs and gives an evaluation of the accession process. And normally the Parliament, after a while, then responds to that and gives its own view. So that report that was voted last week is exactly that report, what you call the Katipiri report, meaning that the rapporteur throws up a report for the European Parliament that then gets adopted first in the Foreign Affairs Committee and then later on in the plenary of the Parliament. That happened last week. Now that report calls on a suspension of the accession talks, but it's a non-binding report. It's a recommendation to the Council and to the Commission. I think the Commission, as always, takes note of such reports. I mean, these reports are important because they reflect the broader view and public opinion. It's the Parliament representing 500 million people, obviously, and then we'll decide what to do with this report.
But as the head of the European Union's delegation to Turkey, are you in favor of this decision or not?
It's a report as I said, by the European Parliament. Now, the position of the member states is that any decision along those lines needs to be taken by unanimity. So the European member states will have to debate this and will have to then decide what to do. So we have at the moment an ongoing accession process, meaning there is a legal status. The legal status is that Turkey is a candidate country for accession to the European Union, and that can only be changed by the very same member states that decided to grant that status.
Spoken like a true diplomat. Okay, from a European perspective, where and what is the problem with Turkey's accession?
The accession has been going on, the formal decision to grant the accession status or the candidate status was taken 20 years ago at the Helsinki Summit in 1999. And then in the year 2004, it was decided to start negotiations, and the negotiations started in 2005. A number of chapters were opened. One was closed, actually. It has been sort of dealt with, and quite a number of chapters after the year 2005 were not opened. So I think that's where we are at the moment. And in addition, I just recall Council conclusions from summer last year, where the European Council said because of the situation in Turkey at the moment, no further work will be done on the accession process. So no chapters will be opened, but it does not mean that the accession process per se is terminated. The accession process is still there. Turkey remains a candidate country. Apart from everything else, Turkey is also a very important partner on many other issues.
Mm-hmm. But I want to sort of dive deeper into some of the reasons behind why additional chapters aren't being opened. Is the problem that Turkey is showing a lack of progress, whether it be in terms of democracy, human rights, the rule of law, or is the problem with Mr. Erdogan himself?
I think Commission President Juncker has been very clear on this. He has said on a numerous of occasions that Turkey, in his view, is moving away from the European Union. And I think the member states have picked that up. Actually, in the Council decision of 2018, they used that phrase, that Turkey is moving away from the European Union, and therefore no chapters can be opened.
Okay, so they feel that politically, ideologically, there's a regression in Turkey's progress.
I mean, it's picking up also the language of the Commission report that speaks of backsliding on human rights issues, on rule of law issues, and these issues that you have just mentioned. What I see, however, today is that Turkey is trying to respond to that. For example, last year the Reform Action Group came together again after a long period of time. 4 key ministries, Foreign Ministry, Justice Ministry, Ministry of Interior and Ministry of Finance, and agreed on various steps to be taken. And many of these steps that are being addressed in this paper that was adopted last year are actually points that are being addressed in the Commission's annual report. So this mainly on rule of law, justice system, how the whole justice system works. And the ministries will now present most likely a justice reform program, a judicial reform program. So this is a very important step in my view.
We just recently celebrated the 3rd anniversary of the Turkey-EU refugee deal.
3 days ago.
And looking at the numbers, Turkey, I think, has played its part. Irregular migration across the Aegean was north of 800,000 back in 2015. It's actually, because of Turkey's efforts, it's dipped down to about 30,000 or so last year in 2008. In exchange, the European Union had committed to 6 billion euros of aid to Turkey. Where do we stand there?
The European Union committed to 3 billion and said in case there's further need, there will be another 3 billion. And exactly that, we came to this conclusion. There is further need. So already last year, the European Parliament and the Council, who are responsible for the budget of the European Union, decided to provide another 3 billion. And that is coming now. So we are at the moment in finalizing and completing the work under the first tranche of 3 billion. So by the end of 17, we signed all the contracts that are necessary. The money is now being paid out. I know there's a very strong focus always on money, how much money has paid. I mean, we are focusing more on the results that we are seeing. How many schools have been built, how many hospitals are being built or have been built, how many clinics, how many kids are in school now because of that. So there are plenty of these results-orientated sort of measures that we are taking.
We'll get to those metrics in just a bit, but you said if it's needed in terms of a 3+3 deal.
Yes.
If you were to look at some of the statistics published by the Turkish government, they say that they've spent more than $30 billion on this refugee crisis. Could there be a need for more funds to be given to Turkey?
I think there's always the possibility. It also depends how the crisis develops. If this crisis is going to end, if people are no longer in need, if people can be stand on their own feet, economically speaking, and we do a lot of programs that will allow actually people coming off the humanitarian support program. You may know there is this Kızılay card. Refugees get a certain amount of money per month, but this is a stopgap measure, just simply to help people who are among the most vulnerable. So we're trying to reduce that number together with the Ministry of Labour and Family to reduce that number of people that are dependent on the small amount of money. So we're trying to help them to increase their skills, and that is foremost language skills, obviously, because you want to work in Turkey, so you need to speak the language. This is both for kids but also for grown-ups, but there's also other skills. Vocational training is very important. Entrepreneurial skills is very important. There are plenty of Syrian business people. So a lot of things is being done to reduce that number. But there's one point that I want to add here. It's not only the numbers of refugees have gone down, and more importantly, the number of people dying in the Aegean has gone down. I think that's a very important effort and success for both Turkey and the European Union, and mainly for Turkey because the Coast Guard and the Gendarmerie and the law enforcement agencies are very good at that. And there is a side sort of aspect to destroy the smuggle operations.
Mr. Ambassador, let's talk visa liberalization. According to the talks between Turkey and the Europeans, 72 criteria were put forth, and I believe that Turkey has fulfilled 66 or has met these 66 benchmarks, has met 66 criteria. When do you expect the Turks to fully fulfill them?
It's a long process. You're absolutely right. Turkey and the European Union have agreed on certain benchmark conditions that need to be fulfilled, things that have to be in place before visa liberalization can be granted. One very practical one was achieved just in December, namely the issuance of biometric passports. So this was one of the criteria, and it was ticked in December. There are a couple of others. I mean, actually, there are 6 other criteria that still need to be fulfilled. Some of them are difficult because they require a change of legislation on the anti-terror legislation, for example, the data protection legislation. The technical talks between Brussels and Ankara are continuing. We have regular exchanges on these issues, and on the Turkish side, I know that various ministries have come together, have formed working groups to come up with proposals that will then come back to us.
Mr. Ambassador, thank you for coming out to Straight Talk. Enjoy the conversation.
Pleasure.